and welcome to the Brace Yourself podcast. This week we are back once again, like the Renegade Master, and we have got an amazing show for you. Really excited about it. We're talking about a really cool topic today, which is major bridges and how to access them. I know, who'd have thought it, right? We've got an awesome guest who knows all about it, a genuine expert in his field, and really knows their stuff. So it's going to be really cool talking to them about this topic, and hopefully we're all going to learn something really interesting, which I am particularly looking forward to. I would like to introduce you to my co-host, Mr. Boyce. Simon, welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you very much. Happy to be alive.
Where are you at the moment?
I'm sitting in a hotel in Houston at the moment. So I've been up in Canada for a few days. I wish it was. This is a better background than what I normally have, so you're welcome.
Well, without further ado, then let's crack on and get into it. At the end, we'll have all our usual features, so fear not, regular subscribers. And we've got some absolutely blinding pictures for you in our Penthouse section. You do not want to miss that. So, without further ado, our guest is joining us from just outside Sheffield, I believe. He started his career as a scaffolder's worst nightmare, a rope access technician back in 2004, and has spent the last 20 years working across some of the most complex and iconic bridge structures in Europe. Rope access, suspended systems, oil and gas civils, and for the last few years as a major bridges project director at Spencer Bridge Engineering. He's also a BSI committee member. He's got a degree in engineering operations management, and he's an all-round great guy and a sincerely lovely chap. Steve Bunting, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ben. It's really good to be here. And thanks for that warm introduction. Very grateful. I don't know who that guy is you're talking about, but...
I was just trying to figure out how to get cycling in it. And I kind of just thought in the last minute, I thought, how can I get that in? Anyway, it all went...
He sounds like a good guy. I'll be him.
I wish I was Steve Bunting. I may.
I wish it was Steve Bunting too, but Steve, happy to have you here, mate. Thanks very much for joining us,
guys. Thanks a lot. Genuine.
So before we get too serious, I got a couple of curly questions to ask. So you left a pretty good manufacturing job back in 2004. Started a punk band. 2006. Started a punk band, and then went to start hanging off bridges. It's a pretty crazy turn of events. How'd all that come about?
You guys have done your research. Wow. So I mean, to go way back, but try and be as succinct as possible. So I left school, did a welding and fabrication apprenticeship. I consider myself someone who grabs opportunities. So during that welding apprenticeship, I realized there was a glass ceiling, in that kind of trade, and I wanted to do more. So I went to university, studied manufacturing and operations management. In that time, did a sandwich year at British Airways engineering at Heathrow, which was pretty awesome. And after graduating, I went on Siemens graduate scheme, where I worked in a factory down in Ensham, which manufactured MRI body scanners. I was really lucky because I specialized in lean thinking at university. So, all Japanese theories on doing more with less. And we just designed a new product at Siemens, and they needed a super efficient production line. So I got involved in that. That was all really cool. And then I moved up to Sheffield. I was a really serious rock climber at the time. And I moved to Sheffield because it was kind of where my heart wanted to be. And I got a job at McAloy. We've all heard of McAloy, the rebar, tensile systems, etc. And then 2006 it was. I know you guys said 2004, but I was 28 years of age at the time. And I've got this little theory around this. So I was doing a great job. I was kind of ops manager of a factory by the age of 28. I had, a good career in manufacturing for quite a young lad, but I had this kind of epiphany. All my rope access mates were seeing the world, traveling the world, doing rope access. And, if you looked at the earth from the moon, when I was 16, I was sweeping the factory, now I'm operations manager of the factory. But ultimately all I've done, that little ant has just gone back and forth to a factory. So I just thought, right, I'm going to smash this up. I'm going to do something completely different. I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. So, because a lot of my friends did rope access, had an exciting life, earned good money, work a bit and have some free time. I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. And a lot of people thought I was crazy. Obviously, my parents thought I was mad. But it ended up the best decision I ever made. Fortune favours the bold and all that. And that was like, it just opened up a whole new career. And here I am, loving life and loving everything that I do.
Well, I got one thing I want to throw in before we get started. And
Yeah.
Steve, you said that we were pretty methodical in our research. Not sure if you've done your research. You're on a scaffolding podcast and you're a rope access technician. Mate, we're sworn enemies. Scaffolders hate ropies and ropies hate scaffolders. How's all that come about?
So I did, funnily enough, when me and Ben had a little bit of a preamble, I did mention that, I actually said to Ben, I hope like Ross Brown isn't hiding in a cupboard or something and is just going to like pull me off screen.
Oh, you don't need to be worried about Ross.
Well, he's on his name drop now, so he'll be loving life.
But yeah, I think when I first got into rope access, 2006, as we've said, which isn't the dawn of rope access, don't get me wrong. By no means is it the dawn of rope access. But ultimately, never the twain shall meet back then. It was rope access versus scaffold. I think in the early days of rope access, a lot of the companies got it wrong. They pitched it against scaffold rather than pitching it as its own, its own nuance, its own sort of category almost. And I think for me, and I know we're going to get into it in more detail later, but for me, the thing that's really made the big difference and amalgamated everybody is suspended access, is systems like, like Quick Deck, like the beach systems from America, stuff like that, because it's an amalgamation of rope techs are going out off the leading edge, doing the kind of weird and wonderful thing to get beam clamps in and connections, etc. The scaffolders are doing like the rudimentary hardcore work and stuff like that. And I think definitely that, I think the two have merged a lot better, and I think there's a lot more mutual respect now. There's a lot more cooperation, and I don't think it's such a butting of heads anymore. And you see that on site. It's not. I don't think that's just me paraphrasing. Like you feel it in the tea shack, and yeah, times have changed.
Yeah, well, I think you saved your reputation by saying the scaffolders do the hardcore work, so I think you'll be safe.
But did I not also say rope access guys do the clever bit?
I had to stop listening to that part.
This episode is powered by Leeches, the one-stop marketplace for the scaffolding and construction industry, with over 30,000 product lines in their online store. They've got everything you need to deliver your project to industry-leading standards. And as a customer for the last 20 years, I know they get you what you need when you need it. If you head over to their online store at leeches.com, be sure to use the discount code Brace Yourself for an exclusive 15% discount as a thank you for being a subscriber to this show. Let's move on. Let's start talking about our topic in detail today then. So we are going to talk about major bridges. I don't know how many projects of that nature you've done, Simon. A couple of big bridges, because I've seen the pictures of them, and I've certainly designed stuff on big bridges before and things like that. But obviously nowhere near the level of experience you've got, Steve. So one of the things I want to ask you, I know you've worked on Severn Bridge, Queensferry, Forth Road, big bridges in the UK like this, and obviously there's loads of big bridges around the world. But for listeners who've never been anywhere near a big bridge project, what makes a major bridge genuinely different from any other access project?
God, we could do 2 hours on that alone. But I guess high level, the biggie is the stakeholders. So you've got government, generally the money is coming from government coffers. You've then got your highways agency. So you've got Transport Scotland, National Highways, etc. Then you've got your bridge operator. So you've got Amy, you've got Bear Scotland, for example, or it might be a local council. And then you've got your main contractor, which obviously for us is generally us. And I think that's something else that's a bit different with me being on the podcast. You were saying rope access versus scaffold, but essentially I'm a main contractor now. I'm not an access provider, but well, we kind of are, but we'll get to that later. And then of course the big stakeholder that a lot of industries don't have to contend with, and we certainly didn't in oil and gas, you don't in nuclear, is the public. So in bridges, everything that you do is laid bare. Every impact you have is impacting from government all the way down to Joe Blogs and everybody in between. And I think that level of exposure is definitely one of the biggies.
Yep, that makes complete sense. And you're right, people don't realise how many different stakeholders are involved, and trying to communicate across everybody and keep everybody aligned and up to date on progress that's a job on its own. So
yeah, it's huge. I mean, you take projects like Queensbury Crossing, for instance, which was my breakthrough project. Really, in project management, it was my breakthrough project. I was working for a company called Rigmar at the time, an oil and gas company. And I was tasked with helping Rigmar transition into civils. There was a big downturn in oil and gas at the time. We'd recently won a project on the new NATO headquarters in Belgium using Quick Deck. It was like 20,000 square meters of Quick Deck. It was absolutely wild. And anyway, so the sort of breakthrough in civils was on the Queensbury Crossing. And, you talk about stakeholder engagement, communication. The day that the car deck connected was like a huge milestone. At Scottish government level, they had to meet this specific target of deck being connected. Now, in order to do that, loads of secondary and tertiary work got left and became, snagging later on. And that was an inefficient way of working. But it just goes to show how important public communication, actually drives the program itself, because they promised deck connect, so they did deck connect by hook or by crook. It's powerful. Similar thing I've got going on with the project in Canada at the moment as well. But that's another story.
Yep, makes sense. And I think it's a great story in terms of your first ever job in this industry was on the same bridge, which was your first role as a project director. So crazy story. Yes. Crazy story there. Is there any lessons that you learned the first time that you took into the second time?
So that particular story, so my first ever rope access project was on the Severn Bridge. So it's the famous dehumidification project. So for background, for listeners, I guess, you guys have probably had some exposure to it, but they realised around that time in the early noughties that the main cable strands within the main cables on these suspension bridges, due to humidity in the cables, were actually going ping. So all the major suspension bridges, to make it like simple layman's terms, are all having dry air pumped through them to reduce this trapped humidity thing. Anyway, I come out of the training centre, manufacturing engineer, rock climber, all that kind of stuff, punk band, as you said before, and I end up on the Severn Bridge. And by massive coincidence, the main contractor was Spencer's. We were working for Spencer's. My employer was Alps at the time. And then I start at Spencer's in 2022, and my first project is to do a principal inspection on all of the underdeck gantries on the Severn Bridge. So main span is 4 gantries, Beachley and Y viaduct is another 4 gantries, and then like a monorail system on the Prince of Wales Bridge. So just coming back to your question, I do listen. I don't practice what I preach. I do practice what I preach. The big difference is obviously, I mean, the biggie without any doubt is understanding the purpose, right? So you go on there as a rope tech, you're doing your bit of a job. You're told to install this particular section of it, or raise a gantry, or tension a wire, or whatever. You kind of, your tunnel vision. And I think the biggie for me going back there as a project director, it's the overall purpose, what you're doing, its importance on the bigger picture. So everything's driven by by a handbook called the DMRB. And that essentially doesn't just dictate to us, that dictates to national highways, how they inspect their bridges, the frequency they have to inspect their bridges, etc., etc. So it was going back and delivering this project, but knowing what it means to the UK road infrastructure, why we all do it, what the drivers are, and going back to what we were saying before about stakeholders, that importance to the stakeholders of what you're doing.
Nice. I mean, that kind of leads nice into, I guess, what I wanted to ask you about. When you first walk onto a project like this, right, and nothing's been committed to yet, and you're kind of just looking at it, what are the kind of things, the telltale signs or whatever, are you looking at on that kind of project, on a job like this, that kind of define how you think about how you'd deliver access on it?
Yeah, so I mean, again, like I could talk to you for an hour on that subject alone.
We might have done in the past,
and don't get me wrong, I like to as well. I think first of all, when you've been doing this a long time, and I don't mean that genuinely in an arrogant way. There's guys that have been around twice as long as I have, but when you've been around, let's say, long enough, that you've got intuition, you've got your own gut feel, you've got your own experience. Yeah. It's almost like the Terminator, when he's looking around and everything's getting logged and assessed and there's like data at the side.
We'll have a field day with that visual, I'll tell you now. Wait till it's on the thing. We'll have half Steve's face, half Terminator. We'll have some on-screen text. It'll look great. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
You're the Terminator, and you're looking at the bridge.
This is a conversation, not an interview.
New profile pic.
Yeah, that's it. Come on. Yeah, so Steve's the Terminator. He looks at the bridge, and we're looking at all this stuff.
Yeah. So I'm gonna geek out even more with sci-fi here. So it's a combination of Terminator and the Matrix, and it's the Matrix in that once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, right? So I arrive at a bridge and I've seen tube and fit work in a certain scenario. I've seen rope access work in a certain scenario. I've seen static underdeck systems work in a certain scenario. I've seen mobile underdeck systems work in a certain scenario, right? And you basically get there and essentially you've got all your work that's in the horizontal plane, so underdeck, parapets, etc. You've got your work that's in the vertical plane, obviously your towers, and then on a stay cable bridge, you've got your works that are in a diagonal plane, and you're essentially just like, you're just tapping into this latent level of information in your brain that you've essentially seen work. But then where it gets more nuanced than that is the suitability of the system that you're proposing. So is it a good fit? You've got, can the structure take the loads, reaction loads? Can the beams take the loads? So a mobile system might have 8 hang-off points and onboard runway beams, whereas a static system in that same square meterage might have 50 connection points. Therefore, it's got better load distribution. But if the mobile system could have been used because it can take the load distribution, then at the end of the project, it's less snagging because the more connection points, and your brain's just going over and over and over all these little nuances. If the scope's really rapid in its inspection, you're going to use rope access straight away, right? Because rope access is super flexible, it's versatile, it's easy to mobilize. There's no design lead in. You can expand the team, you can contract the team, you can relocate the team. But, if it's deep, intensive work, so recently we've been doing a big underdeck scope on the Erskine Bridge, which is blasting, inspection, weld repairs, and then repaint. You wouldn't put rope access anywhere near that because of the robustness of the material that you generate and the material that you supply in. the weight of the blast media, you know, all these things. And this is what I mean about the Terminator thing. You're arriving on site knowing what the client wants because you listen, as we were saying before, so you already know what their intent is. And then you look at the structure and you basically just kind of like superimposing the intent over the landscape, the scenario, and what it is you're seeing.
Nice.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think you described really well there your approach and how you adapt to it to try to find the best solution. I think in reality, not all contractors work that way. And in a competitive tender or a public tender, or, you know, where multiple different contractors could be bidding on the same project, it's easy for people to get into the mindset of, hey, we do rope access, so we're going to do it in rope access. Or we do suspended scaffold, so we're going to do it in suspended scaffold, and not really open their eyes and look at the wider picture. So I'd be interested to hear what's some of the common mistakes that you see that, you know, maybe other contractors, maybe other projects, maybe past projects, but what's some of the learnings you can take from previous mistakes, and then how do we stop that happening time and time again?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a bit of. I'm just trying to think the best way of answering that. So it's a bit of a two-pronged answer, because to answer it for us, for Spencer Bridge Engineering, where I work, and you know, I know this is not a forum for a sales pitch. This is about me, but
every time you mention what you do and promote it, you have to put £5 in the marketing jar, Steve. So it's fine, mate. Now it's fine. It rapidly goes up as well. It's 5, then 10, then 15. I think you've only said it 16 times up to now, so it'll be fine.
Hold on, just seeing. Yeah, all right. I've got a bit of cash, so we're all right. No, but genuinely, right. So one thing I will say about our team, everybody is really into access at our place, and it's unusual. So Luke Fisher, who's like Bridges director, you know, and we'll talk about Aerotrust later, but Aerotrust was his brainchild, right? He wanted to create a system that's better than other systems in that niche, which is mobile. Mark Craig, who's head of tendering, same deal. You know, he used to be into BMU installations, etc. We start with access, right? So when tenders land with us, genuinely, we all sit down and go, right, first and foremost, how are we accessing this job? How are we going to create what Matt Grunberg, the designer of QuickDeck, once said to me, and it stuck with me for life, the quality of access. That was his like little buzzword. And everyone overlooked it back then. Everyone was like, cost, cost, cost. Quality of access. So, you know, we look at that. We look at how we're going to access it. And,
is that the first mistake people make, Steve?
What's that?
Is that the first mistake that people make, not looking at the quality of access?
Yeah, I do think so. I think personally, I think that a lot of big contractors, and I've heard you guys mention it, you guys know it full well. I've listened to all your podcasts and they're brilliant and everyone's on point, is that access almost is put on a spreadsheet as a line item, and it's given a value as a percentage of the main contract. And then at some point down the line, when the pressure's on, then they start to look at access, right? You know, and that happens. We all know for a fact that happens. And I think that's why I'm a good fit at Spencer's. And I think that's why Luke essentially headhunted me to work at Spencer's, to bring even more of that access knowledge into the way that we deliver our own work. But so that's like the main contractor side of it. But you know, warts and all, because you do learn from your mistakes. When I was at Rigmar, we introduced QuickDeck to the UK and European market, right? So way back in 2012, managing director at the time, Rob DL, really, really enthusiastic, innovative guy. He did a deal with Safway, who it was before Brand, and we got the European distribution rights for QuickDeck, and we rolled it out. Like, we were the guys. We rolled it out in oil and gas, offshore heli decks, quayside rig repair, NATO headquarters, bridges in the UK. We did it all first, the QuickDeck thing, you know, and that isn't a flag wave, that's just a fact. But we made mistakes along the way. So one of the projects that we did on the Cromarty Bridge, And a lot of suppliers that are tied to one system do make this mistake. And I've made this mistake and I've learned from it. Square peg, round hole, flog our system at all costs. So we did a solution for the Cromarty Bridge. They needed to get underdeck access between several piers, but they also needed to do cathodic protection down the actual pier leg. So we designed like a multi-level quick deck system. And this is the big problem a lot of subbies have, especially when you're under Cat 3 check scrutiny, is the concept. When you get to detailed design, your concept just unravels. Your concept unravels when you apply the wind load, when you apply the wave load for the tide down the Cromarty Firth, as it was in this instance. Then under Cat 3 scrutiny, it unravels even more. And all of a sudden, you find yourself 2 months into a design journey and your concept was wrong. So we had to reinvent that concept. We had to lift it out of the water, and we ended up having platforms that essentially went up and down the pier legs. Now, the problem with that is static systems tend to have pin joints, so they're not great at, lowering. And I know quick deck, you can lift it and then you punch it out, but it's not a raising and lowering platform. If you want a raising and lowering platform, you want bolted connections like our Aero Truss because they're stiff, right? So we then ended up with these platforms on air tuggers that, lifted a little bit awkwardly in bits and pieces. So I've been there, I've done it myself, where you're like, this is our system, it's the best system in the world. You put in that concept, you win the job, and it's like, right, now deliver. And I think the best word to use is unravel. You get into that design, you get into that Cat 3 check, you get under the magnifying glass, and all of a sudden, and I promised myself I wouldn't swear on this podcast, but all of a sudden you're like, oh shit.
You. Yeah, you know I'm talking to you. What are you doing right now? Get your ass over to scaffplan.com, check out all the features, watch a demo, download a free trial today and see how Scaffplan will absolutely transform your operations. Get there now. How do you handle that, Steve? Because it's a really important point. And, at that point, by the time you start to realize that it's not going to work as planned, you may already be in contracts, you may have already signed agreements, you could already have your price and everything locked in. How do you handle that? And then how do you communicate that back to whoever's paying your bill?
So ultimately, you need a massive amount of enthusiasm, for sure. You need a cool head. You need to know your troops. You need to know who's good. You need to know who to go for what element of the problem. So like I was saying before, I'm a people person. I thrive on relationships. I genuinely do. With your designer, which designer to go to who's not going to crack under pressure, or the person who knew that specific nuance. By this time, you've built a good relationship with your client, so you've got good communication running. So for me, it's so easy in this NEC contracting world to do everything transactionally, to do everything through the early warning, to do everything, through the transactional contractual triggers. But ultimately, it's a human being receiving that early warning, and you need to communicate with these people, soft land things, bit of humility, we've made a mistake here, we've got ourselves in a difficult situation. But I think also, and this is the real hardest pill to swallow, and it's hard to say it, but that client has chosen Quick Deck. That client knows it's the first time it's been used, on a highway structure, under Cat 3 scrutiny, all the rest of it. So it's a shared responsibility, because that's a high risk decision that they've made to use this system that's untried and untested in the environment. And it's just all about going, right, everybody, we've got this problem. It's a real problem. We started everything with the best intentions, but here we are. Let's show some humility. Let's pull together and let's get over it with the minimum impact to the program, with a shared absorbance of the penalties, let's say, for instance, which is another conversation again, obviously. But yeah, we got there. The project went well. The project got delivered. Ultimately, the end client Bear Scotland were happy. The principal works, got delivered, and it wasn't the perfect solution, but we made it work. We didn't bottle it. We didn't walk away. We adapted it. We changed it. It went from this 3-tier rigid platform that was supposed to be able to take the waveforms and the water go through GRP mesh deck, and it ended up a raising and lowering system that wasn't perfect, but it did the job, and the job got done.
I think you've said something there, Steve, that's really important, and just an interesting approach for a lot of people to take away is this approach to, challenge and problems on any construction project, right? Because addressing it and challenging it in that way, I think, would serve a lot of people well across the entire spectrum of construction, certainly in scaffolding, and often it's I don't know how to say it. People are quick to criticize and quick to forget that it is people trying to do the best generally. And can quickly, wade on in, especially contractually, that doesn't help the situation and doesn't get you any closer to a solution. All it does is occupy your brain capacity thinking about stuff that's not actually getting you any closer. Just how do I save my ass or the company's ass or not like a fool? And really, you just need to get on with it.
Because I don't understand how Man United did so well back in the day when Fergie's approach was the hairdryer approach, because it just I just don't see it working.
I'm not sure that's entirely true, mate, to be honest. I think he probably had a few more tools on the belt.
For sure.
It's interesting, because there's two different sides of it. You get the companies like you've come in and you try to do everything you possibly can to scope it and design it right from the outset, give a fair and a reasonable price, and then you hit these challenges as you get into the execution of it. But then on the other side, you've got companies that have built their entire business on going in cheap, winning the job, and then hitting the customer with variations to try to make up the costs down the track. So there's two very different approaches. And I think, as you mentioned, is building that relationship with the customer and having that two-way trust is key.
Yeah. I'm not a massive fan of the variation world. I'm not sure how happy my managing director would be me saying that, but for me, and away from variations, away from all of it, right? I don't like subbies to lose out. I don't like the client to lose out, and I certainly don't want Spencer's to lose out ever. For me, the perfect project isn't a project where you've smashed your variations, your margin's gone through the roof on value and percentage. For me, when a project is finished, everybody's happy. Your subbies feel well looked after, and just as importantly, or more importantly, they've done the job for you and they've delivered. You've delivered to your client. The client's happy. Everyone wants to go out for that end of job beer, and everyone be talking, and a couple of subbies turn up, your site agent turns up, your client focal point turns up. We've got a project on the Keswick Bridge at the moment. It's £4.5 million. We are installing a limpet rescue system in the towers, which is like an assisted rescue system. We've had to do tower strengthening. It's been going on since January 2025. It's coming up to complete in the next couple of months. And that is one of those projects. We've got rope access subcontractors on there. We've actually used a range of rope access subcontractors because our procurement process, I believe, is really good. We always go out for multiple quotes. I pride myself on being very fair and honest. Don't just sit in bed with one contractor. So we've used Aquaterra, who are an oil and gas company. They've done a lot of the confined space construction stuff because it suits their offshore work, working in the legs. Company called Infinite Access are about to do the external painting and loads of other nuances. But I have a meeting with Bear Scotland with James Duthie, who's the client focal point. We have a meeting every Friday, and we're already talking about the end of job beer, where we're going to go. And that, to me, that is so important. You're 2 months away from the end of the project. It's a big, big project. It's Transport Scotland are involved. It's government money. It's potential lane closures. It's all these things. And everyone's worked together, and we're all mates, and we're already talking about, going out for that end of job beer. And for me, that's why I that's why I love what I do. And, you know, that's what my passion goes into is everybody being pleased at the end of it, you know, down to the man or woman who's, you know, cleaning the cabins or whatever. They've been well looked after by my site lads, treated with respect, etc., etc.
Yeah, nice point. Okay, Steve, we're going to move on. We could talk for ages on that, and I'm conscious we don't have hours and hours of everyone's time in their commutes, so we're going to move on because this bit I actually really want to hear what you want to say, what you're going to say about it. So I'm kind of eager, like waiting to. No, I want to talk about this. So this is the bit I wanted to ask you about because it's really tapping into your expertise, and I think a lot of the audience will be interested in this bit of the conversation. So let's talk about the access options and the decisions you make. And ultimately, I guess we're going to get to a scenario where we figure out how you make a decision about what type of access you want to use, right? But I think the first question I kind of want to ask is you rock up to a big bridge like this. Just talk us through at a high level what are each of the access options you have, and in one sentence, what's it good for? You mentioned some of them earlier, but let's just let's just understand what the tools we've got available before we start thinking about when and why for we might use them.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, this is why when Luke phoned me up about the job, I was really excited because ultimately I knew that as main contractor, I'm going to have every toy in the toy box, because if the subbies have got it, I've got access to it, right? So in my past at Rigmar, we had rope access, we had quick deck, and we had the beach system space frame. So I had a nice few options. You know, I had space frame for the mobile horizontal, I had quick deck for the static, rope access, obviously rigging and lifting. Similar mix when I was at Aquaterra, and then at Alps we had space frame. But Spencer's, you know, I've got a lot, and for me, genuinely, I'm really passionate about access and, you know, scaffolding as well, system scaffold, tube and fit scaffold, underslung beams. Ben, you know, the project that we did on Queensferry Crossing, that was an eye-opener for me, those painting platforms that you guys at 48.3 helped us design. Incredible project. You know, I then got to see what you can do with Hacky Span 750 if you're willing to be innovative, and you know, and it's, for me, it's all about tools in the toolbox. So I guess if we're then going to get into the nuances, so if I'm looking at the towers and it's a light touch scope, it's always going to be rope access, right? We talked about how quickly you can mobilize it, how versatile it is. You can relocate the team, you can increase the team size, you can decrease the team size, you can demob them. There's no engineering leading, right? Bang, bang, bang. Vertical plane intensive work. So let's say we were going to do a major blasting and painting job up the towers. Then all of a sudden you've got wind, you've got environment, you need to encapsulate, you know, then we're into obviously punching up with some nice scaffold, right? And because I like tech, I would tend to lean towards the subbies that could use a system scaffold nicely. I know from listening to the podcast, Simon, you're a bit of a system guru yourself. Nothing looks cooler than a really good system build. I was listening to it in the car. I didn't see the photograph, but you guys were talking about someone had shared their penthouse project, and it was a big facade, right? It was a circumferential facade. I was like, I was tempted to pull over and have a look at that one.
I'll mention it now. That's Crossway Scaffolding and BDS. Buckley designed it.
That was it. Yeah.
But Lee told me off for not mentioning it. I didn't even know, but it was really nice. Really nice.
I keep meaning to go back on the YouTube version and rewind it and have a look. But
so we've got light touch vertical rope access, heavy touch or big scope scaffold that you can encapsulate, clear access, men working with heavy tools. Got them.
So then staying in the vertical plane but avoiding tie-ins, then you've got like a vertical platform raising and lowering solution. So when I got my foot in the door on Queensferry Crossing, we were doing the completions of all the stay cable interfaces, and we
So you're talking
essentially
something
had
like a cable, a cradle, or something like a cradle.
yeah. So it was like they were man riding baskets that went
Yeah.
in between the stay cables to give you access, and
Yeah.
then essentially we did actually use rope access guys, but we used them because the man riding baskets essentially became the mobile tool station and became the foothold to be able to lean out in bits and pieces. So there comes a point where you're like, right, I need to amalgamate my rope access with something else that can aid the material supply, give them a little bit more stability. Then you get into my favorite, which is essentially underdeck suspended platforms. So
we're talking about the horizontal plane now.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking about underdeck horizontal plane.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the biggie for me, and I think this has been like the sweet spot of my career, obviously because of the beautiful serendipitous timing of starting at Rigmar when we brought Quick Deck in, and now Spencer's designing our own in-house system, Aero Truss. But basically, you've got another decision plane here. What's that?
That's another £5.
There we go. Where'd you put it?
I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I've not thought it through properly, Steve. It's a nightmare.
We'll have to get need to get like a PayPal thing going.
Mate, definitely. So you're saying, yeah.
So in the underdeck world.
So let's run through the options there, because you describe them far more eloquently than I do.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess fundamentally I need to explain. So I always say static and mobile, right?
Yeah.
So the static solutions, the thing that makes it a little bit ambiguous is the static solutions aren't rigid. They've generally got like pin joints. So they are rigid when all the chains are in and they're all fixed. And it's the static solutions like Quick Deck, like Fly Deck, like Web Deck, like V Deck. They're all the things that are like going against underslung 350 beams and stuff like that. So therefore, generally a large area, good, fairly decent scope duration. But for a static system, the important thing is you need your material supply, right? So let's say a static system was ideal in terms of the nuances of how you attach it to the underdeck. It was ideal center span between the main towers on a big bridge. It might be ideal when you've drawn your picture, when you've done your drawings, and this is going back to unraveling a design. So it looks great, the solution's in there and it looks great, but you might not be able to launch it center span, so you haven't got any walkways either side, so you're going to have lane closures to deliver materials overside and stuff like that. So the only way to get to center span would be to build your Quick Deck, Fly Deck, all that kind of stuff from the abutment all the way out. Well, that's dead material, that's dead time. All that time it's taking you to get there is basically dead money. So then comes in your mobile system, which is what essentially Aero Truss is. So instead of pin joints, the trusses and the nodal points are all bolted together, nylon nodal connections. You pre-build it on the quay side. If it was a marine lift, what we're talking about there, essentially you'd get your rope access guys underneath. They'd lower electric hoists. You bring your barge in, you lift the system up, bang, you've not affected the top side, you've not needed any TM. This is great when we're going back to stakeholders. So, the government or Transport Scotland haven't got to make loads of announcements to the public that the bridge is getting closed, etc. So we've just installed Aero Truss on the Menai Bridge. And we did all of that with marine, underdeck, no intrusions topside, no lane closures, no stoppages, as far as the public are concerned. And, some of the photographs I've showed you for the penthouse, the traffic's just cracking on. They've got no idea this like state-of-the-art heavy lifting projects going on under deck. It's nuanced even when you get under deck.
Yeah. And where do you think the tipping point is between static and mobile? It's again depending on who you talk to. If you've got quick deck, for example, or fly deck, or one of those other ones that you mentioned, you're predominantly going to push that. But then the mobile solutions as well generally take a lot more planning, a lot more engineering, a lot more pre-works, but then they can save a lot in terms of time and resources. Where's that tipping point in terms of a static fixed solution or a mobile one?
I think it's more nuanced than specifically a tipping point. So if you were only going to say tipping point, you go back to what I was saying before about that center span issue, where you'd say, right, well, static's perfect for that. It's 1,000 square meters. Client wants access to the whole thing, front to back, for the duration of the work scope. Great. But then you get into the nuance, can you launch the materials? So there's, you know, there's loads of kind of like layers to the onion. But I'm a massive advocate for underdeck systems. You know, I've had brilliant success in my career with Quick Deck. Clearly, you know, the book's only just opened for Aero Truss, and, you know, we know it's going to be a super successful product. But then even, I guess I don't want to turn my back on the scaffold guys either, but for me, I'm totally sold on underdeck systems. You know, they've been designed purposely for that task. You know, I know Matt Grunberg, the designer of Quick Deck, really well. It's just heart and soul, and his understanding of quality of access, program compliance, you know, all those things were in his mind when he's designing it, which is super cool. The install rates are a lot faster than scaffold, even with 350 underslung beams. You know, they're so much faster. There's less connection points. It's less labor intensive. But let's say you had a really small bridge, so 20,
So
30.
I was going to ask you, Steve, give me some numbers now. When would you pick scaffold over a suspended deck system then? And give us some numbers. When you say really small, how small are we talking? And what's the difference off the ground and that kind of stuff, to give people some way of quantifying it in their mind?
It's difficult to say, but I think, like, it's really hard to put a number on it, but ultimately a very small bridge of up to 50 meters, let's say, is there enough volume there for the suspended systems like Quick Deck, etc., for their install rates to make enough difference versus the material cost? Ultimately, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I couldn't put a specific number on it. You know, I haven't written an algorithm for it.
Why not?
The reality in that situation is you'd have to go out to, you'd go out to market, and this is something that.
So if you say at 50 meters, you might be thinking, maybe, yeah. What about 100 meters then? At that point, you're starting to thinking we're probably going to see some program benefit and installation speed offset the material cost. Is that what your gut's saying typically?
At those numbers, I would be going out to, and again, here's another fiver. Spencers are really good at this. At our tender stage, we write really detailed scopes for access, really detailed design briefs, and we go out across the board. If you look at all of our most recent projects, there'll be tube and fit prices, there'll be Pelosio prices in there, there'll be Quick Deck prices. Obviously now going forward, we'll be looking at Aero Truss in the same space and which is best. And, it's all about the contractor putting the time and energy at tender stage to put decent scopes together, put the legwork in, and then atomize it. And essentially the numbers coming back are what counts. But this is the other really important thing at that stage. And this is sucking egg stuff for you guys. Simon, you've run a successful business. I know that, but main contractors who are good at running NEC contracts get a bad rep. And the reason they get a bad rep is because they know how to run an NEC contract, and a lot of suppliers don't, and they overpromise and they don't meet that promise, and then they go into program delay, and then you're into penalties. So one other thing that's really important when we get our prices back from subbies, is this realistic? Do we believe that they're going to deliver this number, because all right, we'll get the money back in delay damages, etc., if we've set the contract up correctly. That's not the point. Your reputational damage is out the window.
Yeah, Steve, I've got a quick question too. I've been thinking over in my head how to say this for the last 20 minutes, right? So a scaffold company, a suspended fixed access under a bridge, right? Every scaffold company is going to say, yeah, but we could do that out of system. We just build it, we'll tie it in, we'll cantilever it, we'll tie it in, and we'll just continually, progressively cantilever from one side to the other. Or we might be able to float it in, lift it up, lock it into place, depending on the circumstances. Where do you find the difference between, let's say, a purpose-built suspended system like a quick deck or a fly deck or some of the other ones you mentioned, versus a built-in situ system scaffold? Where does one win over the other? Is it that the system scaffold is cheaper rental, maybe longer installation, or the suspended access or the quick deck takes longer to build, and it's more expensive rental? Where's the differences between the two, and why would you pick one over the other?
I get what you're saying. You've been waiting that time to say that, and I feel like the answer's in quite a bit of the stuff that we've discussed. So, the quality of access is a big one. The number of contact points, obviously, with a suspended access system, I keep using the example. It's because I've worked with it the most. Other systems are available and all that, and I get that.
Yeah.
And I hope listeners that work for rival companies or whatever aren't miffed about it. But with Quick Deck, for instance, you can have your chains at 5 meter square spacings. So I've managed a project on the quayside in Hartlepool, 5,000 square meters of it underneath the Ocean Princess, which was a semi-submersible rig. And even with all the chains in and everything, you look around and you almost feel like you could play a game of football on it. Like the difference versus the tie-ins of tube and fit and underslung 350 beams is crazy. Now, that isn't just about the quality of access. That's also, when you do your decommission, that's all about contact points. That's how many contact points you're going to have to move, do the snagging, do all your paint snagging, etc., etc. So there's more to even the contact points argument. And then when you look at our aero truss system, for example, you're going along the runway beams, so you haven't got any of those, you don't even have those contact point issues because we're connecting to the runway beams on the bridge and then we're traversing. So with a system like aero truss, you've kind of almost got yourself in that world where you've got a large enough platform to do the heavy works, to cope with the blast materials, to cope with the feeder steel if you're doing steel repairs, etc. But then you've almost created a hybrid situation where you've got that versatility that you've got with rope access in terms of the ability to move around. And I owe you another fiver here, but something else we've done with Aero Truss, because we've had, and honestly, it's been the best for me being an access guy and now being a main contractor, but our team being willing to design a system. Everything you've ever wanted is going into this system. So the way that we've designed it is the integration. So the encapsulation integration, it's been designed ground up from the beams underneath to the nodal point connections, stair towers up and over. So when I used to work with the beach system, which most people call space frame, that's like a 30-year-old system now. It was groundbreaking at the time, and it's done some amazing work in the industry. It was decades ahead at the time, not disputing that. But when you come to try and put encapsulation on it, when you try and put an access egress, you're basically like adapting and moving things around, and it's cobbled together and it's not supposed to be there. And then we're back into unraveling at Cat 3 check and all that kind of stuff. And I guess what we've done with the Aero Truss is think about all that whilst we've been designing it. So everything bolts in, everything locks on. We've got this thing called Speedy Curtain, which is like a encapsulation, like a curtain side of truck, a bit like the keyed system that you guys will know and have designed many times. So we've basically looked at all the problems that you have, adapting other people's systems and designing those in from like first principles, nuts and bolts. But no one system fits everything. Like, that would just be arrogant to say that, everything's got its place. And that's what I've really enjoyed about this conversation, because it's actually it's the human being that's got to decide which. You know what I mean? The system can't decide which.
You've just set up the final question really nicely, Steve. So one of the things we're going to ask is, and we're not asked it, was so the decision about what access system or combination you're going to use, who should be making it and when should they be making it? Like short and sharp. In the ideal circumstance, what's the timeline that should be made under, and who?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's going back to what I was saying before about we're another fiver. We're in a bit of a sweet spot where we live and breathe access. So we've got that side of it right. So I'm going to take my Spencer's hat off. I'm going to put my Rigmar Alps Aquaterra hat on. So you're quite right in that the decision can be quite heavily too commercial. So the decision, because access is often an afterthought or it's late down the line, a percentage of budget has been put aside for it. That decision can be very commercially led. We've got to do this amount of access. Here's the pot of money we've got for that access. Make it work. And I feel that what you really need is you need your engineers, and you need, really above all else, you need your operations team, because that Matt Grunberg phrase, and it's a great phrase, and Matt Grunberg is such a cool guy. I've been on a road trip with him all over New York State looking at quick deck projects and stuff. Like, that guy is like passion personified. And basically you need the operational people who understand the quality of access that they need. They understand the material supply line features. They understand the robustness of the encapsulation. They understand that too many tie-ins going to slow the job down, and there's going to be additional cost in, moving connections and all that kind of stuff. They're the people that need to be in that process and involved in that process. And again, I think that's something that we do have at Spencer's. We have the people who understand how to deliver a project, involved at tender stage, involved in I'll get dragged into.
Steve, I get it, right? Just let me just ask you specifically. There's lots of people that make up that decision, right? But when are you going to make it? It's because what you're describing, I'm sorry to be forthright, but what you're describing is early contractor engagement, get the people involved. This happens on a good construction project. This happens everywhere. That's what you're describing. This is not major bridge uniqueness. What I'm interested to know you is, if someone's going to try and win that job, and you're in a competitive tender situation as a principal contractor, when are you making the decision? Like, you've got to make that decision before you go in with your final submission, right? And then you've kind of got your colours nailed to the mast once you go in with that tender submission, right?
Yeah.
So what are you doing? Are you going to leave that as late as possible, and you're going to ask your supply team to put all this work in to do that? Or are you just relying on your own expertise and knowledge within Spencer's to come up with what you think is the best solution at that tender stage? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, genuinely, we go out for inquiries at our tender stage.
Yeah.
So when we submit our package of work, we've already been out to loads of different suppliers. We've come up with our Clause 32 contract program, and it is another one. This feels like a little bit of a segue, but and loads of people get this wrong, and it happened to me all the time as an access supplier, having no visibility of the Clause 32 program. So they go like, here's the bridge, here's the project that we're doing. So you go, oh yeah, we'll price it to all be covered in whatever system all at one time. But then if they shared the program with you, which is why we always do this, the project might be in phases of 100 square meters at a time, right? So why would you want 1,000 square meters? So that contractor who's had that misconception and priced it like that, if you've only got commercial people reviewing those proposals, that one's going out the window straight away. But if they understood the Clause 32 program a little bit more, they might have said, oh, actually, you need a tenth of that material, and what you need is labour revisiting site on a 3 monthly basis. So it's not just giving them, and I did forget this before, but it's not just giving them a really detailed scope, a detailed design brief, but it's your suppliers also understanding the nuances of your clause 32 to know where all the touch points are, to know where the injection of material is. And, because going back to my degree days, it's all about being lean. You've got to be as lean as you can on site. You plan a project to have just enough of everything that you need and not too much. And that is that's the lean dream, isn't it?
I think that's a perfect place to, like a perfect soundbite to stop that element of that conversation on, right? Because
do I get a $5 back for that?
Absolutely not. Mate, you're in three figures. I'm telling you. I didn't realise this show was sponsored by Spencer's Bridge Engineering. Did you, Simon? Did we write that in beforehand? I'll tell you what.
Maybe it is now. Maybe we discovered that in the last hour.
I reckon there's an invoice going into Spencer's
I wore Ralph Lauren instead of Spencer's shirt.
No, it's wicked, mate. That was really cool, really interesting. I feel like I've learned a load of stuff just from listening to you about it. And what's interesting is it's not new. It's just the way that those things are contextually applied to that kind of project. Do you know what I mean? A lot of the stuff you described, as well as Simon nodding away, I know we talked about it all the time. Early contractor involvement, understanding a program, understanding material utilization and when you need labor and when you don't. And the key element at the end you said there about having the right amount, just enough, the right amount of everything on site applies to every scaffold project in the world, right?
Yeah.
And the key takeaway I took out of that too was just the way that you look at different scope of works in different environments, different locations, different parts of the bridge, which approach is better and why and which arrangement. So I think that'll be helpful for a lot of listeners as well.
I think there's loads to take. I think people will be able to take an awful lot of cool information and apply it to their projects in the future and hopefully have some success.
Extract some gems out of my waffle.
That's it, mate. That's it. Exactly that.
That's it. Well, I guess when we go into the next segment, the sponsorship package is probably going to look even more obvious.
But Steve's did I
overplug there? Because for me, it just genuinely intertwined with the narrative. I wasn't on some kind of agenda.
I think when you're passionate about something and you know what you're talking about, it naturally comes out. So it's fine. I think the people will see it for what it is. So don't stress about that.
Yeah,
don't stress about it. We'll just send Spencer's an invoice for it. It's fine. Right, let's move on.
While we're on the Spencer train, let's get into everybody's favourite part of the show. It's time for the penthouse to the dog.
Indy's not here. She's gone, Dan. Can you believe it?
She's gone to bed. So that's all right. So
she had enough, mate. I didn't even realise it was going on. Anyway,
let's get into some more suspended access.
Yeah, I'm gonna share our first picture. Steve's kindly provided some photographs for us. So, Steve, we're gonna have to be reasonably succinct with this because I reckon we could talk about these later. But when I open these pictures up, and I'm just building this up, when I opened these pictures up, I thought, wow, that is really cool. And some of these are possibly the best pictures I've seen of this kind of stuff. So why don't you give us a little tour of what's happening now? I will spend 30 seconds on each photo, and I've got 3 lined up that you shared with us. So
just before we do that, Ben, Steve, I'm going to give you a little bit of free rein here to have a little plug on the Aero Truss system because I'd never heard of the system before we prepped for this show. And so some of the listeners at home, when we've talked about Aero Truss a few times, may not know what it even is. So if we can, just give us a little 30-second intro and then we'll dive into the pictures.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, Aero Truss is our in-house access system that's been designed, manufactured, pre-Cat 3 checked, FAT tested, the whole shooting match by Spencer Bridge Engineering. So it's the brainchild of Luke Fisher, Bridges director. Back when I started working at Spencer's in 2022, the idea was conceived. and our principal designer, Gordon Nielsen, who's just like, I mean, you meet engineers and then you meet Gordon Nielsen. This guy is just beyond.
Are we looking
So
at Aero Truss here, Steve?
Yeah, that's all Aero Truss. So what I was talking about previously about the integration. So you see there, you can see the access towers. One of those towers has a rescue davit on it, which is your emergency rescue tower, obviously. The ones with the yellow gates are eventually your stairwells. That's your onboard runway beam. So what the system does, I'll try and explain it in a way that listeners who are driving can get their heads around it, because I'm normally driving when I listen to your podcast, to be honest. Essentially, those runway beams that you can see on board, they mimic the runway beam under the bridge. So this project is the bicentennial refurbishment of the Menai Bridge for the A55 DBFO, who are the operators. So they operate the whole of the A55, Chester to Holyhead Port, there or thereabouts. And the Menai Bridge is the trophy bridge on that section of road. So obviously it's a really old bridge. It hasn't got in situ runway beams that have got adequate capacity for the system to traverse back and to. So essentially what we've done there is we've flipped the runway beams on their head. So the beam clamps attach to the lateral beams on the bridge. And then essentially what you do is you do like you move the beam clamps along the bridge, and your traverse is happening on the runway beam that's actually on board. So, the easiest way of looking at it is that you flipped it upside down, your runway beams on the deck instead of on the bridge.
Nice.
So the cool thing that we've done with this, so we used the beach system that, like I said before, I played around with quite a lot in my days at Alps and at Rigmar. At Spencer's, we used that on the Keswick Bridge. One of the massive problems, not just the integration problems you have with Space Frame because it's 30 years old and doesn't interface with system scaffold very well and all the rest of it. One of the key things is that the truss members on the beach system are a cruciform cross section. So the wind turbulence is massive. And then when you stack up beam after beam after beam, you're starting to get some big reaction loads into the structure. So the reason we've called the system Aero Truss is down to all the machine nodes. Everything has been designed with rounded edges to be aerodynamic. We've run it through STAD and FEA and applied wind to it. And those loads stack up very, very quickly, when you start looking at and I
can kind of see that here, right, Steve? That's what I'm looking at there, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit blurred on that photograph, but essentially all those nodes are CNC machined. They've all got curved edges. The other main thing, obviously, is that the trusses themselves are all made out of tubulars, aluminium tubulars. So down to like forensic level, we've reduced the wind load. And, as a scaffold designer, Ben, those numbers stack up fast.
Steve, what kind of load can you get on that deck? What kind of load are you putting on there?
It completely depends, Ben. That's the golden question. The golden question is, what's the load that it can take? Essentially, it can take what you want, because the other beauty we've done, and the other systems don't do a lot. Pretty much no other system does it. The way we've designed it is you can compress those truss spacings as tightly as you want. So you increase your capacity by doing that. The other thing Gordon's done at design is we can actually multi-level it. So by multi-leveling it, you can get your span between runway beams up to 50 meters, which is like insane.
How many levels would you be putting on to do 50 meters?
We're thinking 2 levels at the moment. Right. So at the moment, there isn't a suspended access system out there that could replace a permanent underdeck gantry on, say, the Severn Bridge, where the runway beams are either side of the bridge on the edge of the deck, and that's the same deal with the Humber Bridge. All these bridges need painting. So we've thought about this, because over the decades we've been involved in all these projects. We've got the drawings for all those bridges. Essentially, all that work has gone into the design of this system. We've started with the blueprint of the bridges that we're hoping in time will, end up in quarries. It's super cool, mate. It's so exciting.
I'm going to move you on to this project again because Simon's free reign to big up aero trusses. But we're back on project focus now. So let's have a look at the next picture because this is ace.
That's got me my bonus. Now we'll get into the project.
So tell me what's happening here, Steve. What are we looking at? Other than obviously we're looking at the bridge. Tell me what's going on here. Paint the picture in a couple of minutes for the people that are
so
between this one and the next one, which I think is finished state.
Yeah. So basically, what's going on here, mate, is just kid in a sweet shop moment for me. It's just the absolute dream, right? So you can see there the two smaller platforms on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side. So on the Anglesey side and the Bangor side, they're eventually going to be traversed, and they're going to be for working on the bearings. So that one's going to be far right, hard up against the bearing interface. The reason that they're launched where they are is because of having sufficient depth for the barge.
I was going to say, because that's where the water is.
Go on, sorry.
I said, because that's where the water is.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly. That's where there's sufficient depth for the barge. So obviously you can see the other platform on the left-hand side. That's going to be one of the main painting platforms. That's installed. But the third platform that's it's just so exciting. So, I talk about there's classic rope access projects when you get together with rope access mates. One of them was a big MOD job that we did in Cyprus in,
so Steve, what we're looking at here.
So basically, sorry, mate. So what you're looking at there is the aero truss system being raised. So the barge is just going off camera, as you can see there.
Yeah.
You've got rope access technicians hanging from the lateral beams underneath the bridge. Yeah. They've installed the 40mm wire ropes. They're double reeved. And essentially what you're seeing there is a 4-point Tirac winch lift, 3-ton Tiracs, one in each corner. And the rope access team are operating those Tirac winches, raising that platform, and it'll eventually be connected to the underdeck on the runway beams that we looked at before.
Nice.
But just going back, just quickly, because I do want to get this in, but talk about classic rope jobs. I took a rope access technician that I know with me to Canada recently for a project that I'm doing over there. And he said this project is basically going to replace all those folklore projects for the, were you on Menai kind of thing. And that means a real lot to me that, the rope guys who were on the job are like, this is the absolute zenith, mate. Everybody just loved it.
So that's the finished one, right?
Yeah.
That's it all in situ.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing what happens here is then these two outside ones, these guys move back in to access your bearings and do that work. Yeah. And then these two main platforms are traversing between those 2 points along the bridge, one on the left, one on the right, doing the main underdeck bridge work, right?
Yeah. So from those, you'll be doing the blasting, NDT visual weld inspection, any weld repairs that transpire, and then eventually painting. What I haven't got a photo of for you here is with all the speedy curtaining and everything fully encapsulated.
Yeah, but then you can't see the good stuff.
Exactly. So,
is there much of a camber in the bridge there, and how does that affect it?
It doesn't affect.
It's hard to tell from the photo.
Yeah, I mean it's essentially flat, but even on bridges where you have got a major incline, so let's say the Keswick Bridge is 4-degree incline, it's just the way that you design the system, how you have your dollies braked. When you do the traverse, you're doing the traverse essentially with like 3.2 ton, turfers. You can double reeve them if you're on something really steep. And again, this is going back to not over-promising at design stage. So, we've got Gordon Nielsen, we've got senior designers, we've got all these people. And because we already had the bridge drawings, a year ago, we're already looking at solutions for if Humber came up for painting, if Keswick came up for painting. Everybody's already on it, you know. So when we come to submit an inquiry, when those projects come in, they've been part engineered. It's not going to be like I was with Quick Deck on the Cromarty Bridge, where you superimpose your system onto a drawing of the bridge, and then you get awarded it, and it all unravels. All the feasibility studies are all part done, and you can tell by my wittering, like we're really excited about it.
The entire scaffolding industry will forgive you, Steve. Don't worry about it, mate. It's all good.
But again, everything's got its place. Everything's got its place.
I'm only playing, mate.
Aero truss isn't going to be the best solution for every single project, you know, and that's the beauty of this market that we're in.
Listen, we're gonna have to move on because we haven't got 2 hours and we're in danger of hitting our time limit here that we self-impose, and we've got to do the second part of our feature section here, haven't we? Right. So, Simon, what did you say to me earlier when you said where are all these pictures from? Because it did crack me up a little bit.
I said, why do we keep getting all of these doghouse photos sent in from people in the UK? Is it because the UK scaffolders are not as good as the Australian ones? Or why aren't we getting the Australian ones? Maybe it's got something to do with the 3 listeners we have in Australia. But other than that,
well, here we go.
Interesting concept.
I reckon. I think this is one. I messaged our friends at the Scaff Police today, and he said, "Yeah, you can crack on. Use the things from the show." So we big up that group because it is hilarious, and some of the guys in there are so funny, and some of them are badass scaffolders. But this is probably not one of them. So what can you see here? What can we see here? This is a semi-detached house somewhere in the UK.
What I can't see is any standards.
Well, mate,
all around that corner.
I was trying to think of a witty remark. What we do here, Steve, often we'll say, right, what you've got to do is take the role that you're the scaffolding contractor here, or this is your job and you're justifying it, right? And we normally give it a go. And I was talking to Simon before the show, and he says to me, "Ben, you're going to do this one because this is in the UK and it's a temporary roof." I was like, okay, great. This sounds wicked.
To be honest, I've got this one. Can I take it?
Mate,
more than welcome.
Mate, of course you can. Right, you've got 30 seconds. You ready? 30 seconds.
The reason I'm happy to take it. So for background, the reason I'm happy to take it is because the standards basically just run out where that bush is, right? So that's
right. Don't give it away. Don't give it away. Just because you live next door.
That's me speaking. What's that?
So just because you live next door, but one. You got 30 seconds. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Listen, mate. I'm really sorry. Like, clearly looking at that, it's got no integrity. But essentially what's happened is we were building the scaffold.
20.
We got as far as the bush. And then essentially your next door neighbour said, "I want nothing landing on my driveway." So this is what we've had to do, mate. It's like, it's crazy, but this is what we've come up with.
And we only had the gear we had on the truck.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good excuse. That happens all the time, doesn't it?
Ben said to me before the show, he said, "How do you think they actually got that beam on the outside? Do you think
amazing,
that somebody actually sat out on that cantilevered beam and kind of like lifted one end up with a rope and then lifted the other end up with a rope and kind of pinned it in place?" And
it's absolutely incredible.
I love how these beams, this one here, it's got 5 fittings, 1, 2, one obscured by the rope, and there's definitely not one there. So that's fixed up 5 fittings cantilever in that way to pick up the end of this. I love how the boards come out of this last ledger here, and this one's just sitting. What I thought was, Simon, is the fella says to him, "Mate, you've got 6 beams and you've got to build a temporary roof." And that's it. With a big bridge, you can only use 6 beams. Go.
If it was just for access, it'd be bad enough. But having a roof on top is a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's incredible. So where there's no standards, obviously, coming down on next door neighbour's drive, which is my excuse.
Well,
what have they got in terms of diagonal bracing? Is that it too? Wow.
I don't know. I mean, look, you can see a few braces in it, lads. Come on, stop being so critical. I mean, it's got some bracing in it. This thing's standing. This has been up for 3 years. It's a testament to scaffolding ingenuity, and it's got. No, I'm joking. Monoflex won't look like that if it'd been up for 3 years. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm still baffled how they built that with 3 beams.
Pretty good containment system too. There's no gaps in it.
Mate, hats off to the scaffolders involved. You had 3 beams on this wagon. Make it work, lads.
Yeah.
Crack on.
To complete that job and still be alive.
That's a good effort. Fair play. Fair play. I think I was quite a good one, to be honest. Quite a good one. Nicely.
Good or bad? Like, what distinguishes good? Good as in good example or good scaffold?
That's not good in the context of a good scaffold, I don't think. Yeah. That was a good example for the doghouse.
That was a good doghouse feature.
Yeah, it was a good shit job.
I mean, we had a great penthouse picture, and I had to reel Steve in, otherwise we'd have been here. We'd have been here till, well, God knows, till it's evening at your time. But that was really, really cool, and I really enjoyed looking at that picture, Steve. Those pictures really good. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It was really good job, really good. And I'm sorry we haven't got more time. We just we maybe have to come back for part 2 at some point.
No,
so anyway, we are rapidly approaching the end of this show. So all that remains to be said is thank you very much, Steve, coming on and sharing some of your expert wisdom, doing a whole show and only mentioning your employer once. That was unreal. Thank you to Awesome as ever for doing it. Thank you to the Scaff Police Group. Thank you, Simon. You're a great show host. Thank you for joining us all the way from Houston on your travels at the moment. So that's really, really cool. And of course, thank you to all our listeners. Without you, we wouldn't do it. So please tell your friends about it. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform that you use, and make sure you get the episode next week when we record our next one. So don't miss it. We're live in a couple of weeks' time. I fumbled it. Doesn't matter. Fuck it. Who's lifting at this point anyway?
That was terrible. Hopefully everyone's like switched it off by now.
Done. In. Right. Listen, we're done now. We're going. We'll see you again soon. Until then, brace yourself, guys.